good day to everyone, wherever you are dialing in from any part of the world. My name is Isabelle Moreau, and I am the Director General of GSOA. Thank you for joining us today for this new webinar on the industrial IoT. This is a webinar which is part of the GSOA webinar series in association with Connectivity Business News. Most of you are aware, just as a side note, that GSOA and GVF joined forces on the 1st of June earlier this year to create a single global trade association, giving a stronger unified voice for the broader satellite industry. So I'm very pleased to share this with you today. The webinars, like many more initiatives, will continue going forward under our new combination. With a different branding, and the webinar series, now delivered in partnership with Connectivity Business News, has over 31,000 viewers from 166 countries. This online platform allows the access to knowledge and hearing about the latest trends in our satellite SATCOM industry to many people who are not able or not necessarily able to attend industry events in person. Please note that the video library as well is still on the old YouTube channels for those of you who are used to follow us, and now also on the GSOA website. So I'd like also to thank our sponsors of today's webinar, who are the creators of the new online training courses for those in the space and satellite industry, Space Business Qualified. And as you know, these courses are a great way to onboard your colleagues, partners, staff, to broaden the knowledge on existing and prepare staff as well for increased responsibilities, on the new stuff that is onboarding your companies. So with that, with this sort of housekeeping, I'd really like now to turn to my distinguished panelists today and introduce you to this select speakers that I have with me, starting with Telemaco Melia, who is the VP General Manager at EchoStar Mobile. Telemaco manages the day-to-day EchoStar mobile business, coordinating sales, technology, and product activities. We also have Michael Minchin, who is the head of IoT ST Engineering iDirect. Michael is a senior telecom professional with over 25 years of experience in the industry, who pivoted to the satellite comms industry in 2003. And Michael recently moved to ST Engineering iDirect to lead and drive product for their IoT portfolio. So very relevant to our discussion today. We also have Gaël Dulong, who's Market and Business Development Manager for Enterprises and IoT at Eutelsat. Gaël has been working in the telecom industry as well for over 20 years, with a focus on sales and business development with B2B customers, and he has a strong knowledge of the end-to-end IT ecosystem. And last but certainly not least, I have Niels Kompier. Niels is the head of the carrier department at Sateliot since 2022. So since last year, Neil has over 20 years of experience in the SATCOM industry, and prior to joining Sateliot, Niels was also at Immersat, I think, for something like 14 years. So very long experience. So before we turn into the conversation, maybe I just want to say a few words about, what brings us today onto this panel and what we're going to be discussing, industrial IoT. When we think of the Internet of Things, it's mostly associated with the connected devices in the home and smart city sensors, mostly in urban areas or in most advanced economies. However, in combination with 5G, many more opportunities are now created for businesses to really leverage the Internet of Things. And for businesses located in areas that are not served by terrestrial networks, such as those in the mining, farming, maritime, and energy sectors, satellite communications can really provide the vital links that are needed to connect your employees, to connect your machines, by enabling seamless and efficient connectivity, data transmission, and global coverage for industrial applications in any part of the world. Beyond these applications is the world of the industrial Internet of Things, what we call IoT. and the transmission of sensor data and control information across network infrastructures, with satellite networks facilitating global connectivity via satellites that are increasingly performant in all orbits. And these offer higher bandwidth, either as a standalone solution or to complement terrestrial networks using cellular technology. So today we're going to discuss the current and likely the future developments in lowering the barriers of entry of satellite IoT and including the potential of the new enhanced technologies and capabilities. So with that, I really would like now to turn to my distinguished panelists and maybe ask you all really a question, you know, sort of which enables you to maybe introduce yourself as well and your companies with respect to the question. What, in your view, is the main driver for the expansion of IoT products? What role and in particular, what added value do you think satellite can offer to accelerate the uptake of IoT and industrial IoT, both in urban and rural areas and in developed and least developed economies, which is where really I think the satellite industry has a big role to play. So maybe I'll start with Tele, which I will now call Tele. So Tele, I'll maybe kick off with you if you could answer. Thank you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, everybody, wherever you are connecting for this webinar. So EchoStar, as you know, is providing global services worldwide, both broadband and narrowband services. What we have been seeing in the recent history is that there is a growing need of connecting objects wherever they are. People started with buildings, so famous smart buildings. They moved to cities, smart cities, and now they realize that there are a lot of there is infrastructure assets that are there in the nature that needs to be monitored. We've been seeing people that water flooding, climate changes, all of those require objects that can monitor some sort of parameters, whether it's temperature, water, humidity, or other things, vibration, that otherwise people wouldn't be able to do it. So I think that the main driver is really how I get the data out of the field and how I can monitor those assets, which are becoming more and more critical to our everyday life. And clearly, when you look at these objects, one of the immediate answers on how to cover that is satellite, okay? Because it's a very cost-efficient way of providing broad coverage, anywhere in the world. So the way we see it is really, people will need to connect objects. Satellite is not the Swiss knife to all the connectivity problems, but clearly can solve many of them. Where we see satellite a very interesting tool is for all these long skin infrastructure, where deploying terrestrial network is not technically possible, but commercially not really interesting. And then you can obviously provide connectivity to these objects in a very cost-efficient manner. So low density, long skin infrastructure that will require otherwise expensive setups. And then there are use cases, honestly, that we even as working in the connectivity industry don't imagine right now. So that the goal is really to spark an ecosystem of people that will take it and will use it. This is where we are focusing today. So yes, we have a number of verticals where we see a lot of traction, which are obvious. There will be many, and we hope there will be many that are not there yet, that we can just enable, because when you have a good connection with a lot of link margin, low power consumption, then people start to think differently, because they realize that maybe they can leave the object in the nature for 10 years without touching it, and they don't need to bother whether the connection is terrestrial or satellite. So that's what we are doing today, and really pushing the ecosystem beyond the natural conception of what satellite can do.
Thank you, Telen. And there are a few things I'll want to come back, in particular around the cost efficiency way, and that I might take as well with other speakers. But Michael, I'll turn to you, and maybe I direct ST Engineering. Like for you, what is the main driver and the value added of satellite?
Yeah, hello everybody, and welcome to this session. Thank you for joining. From our perspective, the main driver really at the moment is the advances in integration and interoperability. So I think to date, this challenge has deterred implementation of satellite-based IoT solutions. It's been a big barrier to retrieve the information, but also to analyze and process it. We think that the continued integration of IoT within the satellite industry is definitely driving expansion. And it involves numerous factors, both partnerships with IoT device manufacturers, connectivity providers, cost efficiencies, energy efficient satellite devices, a whole range of things. And those business models are being adapted in order to help bring down cost and fit. But there are also areas around regulatory partnerships and satellite constellation collaborations as we move from GEO to LEO. And all of this sort of depends on the particular use case, the IoT use case, and the various constraints of the satellite operator. As you said, I think IoT is well established in the home, and the standards are kind of agreed upon there. But within the satellite IoT space, I think we're still in the process of becoming standardized, and we need that to enable broader uptake in B2B applications. And that standardization of IoT really involves both technology standards and regulatory standards. Although there's ongoing work, I think we're not quite there yet, and there's still challenges to overcome. So, excellent. In terms of the added value, I think from our perspective, the added value that satellite brings is really the ubiquitous connectivity. So obviously enterprises, industrial IoT needs strategies which provide comprehensive coverage and reliability, and satellite technology is really the only telecommunications solution which delivers complete coverage for IoT and reaches places that no terrestrial technology can. So that for us really is the added value of satellite.
Thank you, Michael. And interestingly, I might come back to you later on what you mentioned, not just about the standards, but also regulation, how you need as well to have the ecosystem, the regulatory ecosystem in place, which I think might be interesting, different views on this. Maybe I'll turn now to Gaël at Eutelsat, and again, from your perspective, added value and main drivers of expansion of IoT products.
Yes, thank you, Isabel. And first, I'm very glad to be with you to share our initiatives and ambitions for satellite IoT. And I would say that in terms of main driver for the expansion of IoT solutions, IoT products, is about dealing with a fragmented market and complex sales. So today, it's still a challenge to address IoT projects. So as a solution provider or a service provider, you need to hide, in some words, the complexity of the end-to-end solution by orchestrating the full ecosystem from the chipset providers to the end users. And that's, to me, the main challenge based on the discussions also I had with end users. Sometimes the technology is there. You can connect various devices, plenty of devices, but then also when you talk to the customers, let's say the big challenge is to demonstrate also an ROI to connect those sensors. And so you need to team up not only with the IT ecosystem, but also with the end users in order to support his own initiatives internally and demonstrate this ROI to make it let's say profitable for all the stakeholders. And then in terms of what the satellite can bring to foster the adoption of IoT services, it's obviously the coverage, because today most of the networks and the terrestrial networks are deployed where there are people. So it's based in most cases it's based on the density of the population. But on the other hand, most of the devices are not in the urban areas, but mostly in hard to reach areas or suburban or hard to reach areas. So for this reason, of course, satellite is a complementary solution to terrestrial network, and you can easily deploy devices from one day to another.
Thank you, Gael, and I'll turn to Niels now, and Satelliot as maybe one of the most recent players, coming onto the market. So very interesting to listen to you as well, Neil.
Yes, thank you, Isabel. That's very true. We are very recent. Welcome, everybody. My name is Niels Kompier, and I'm the head of the carrier department within Satella IoT. And as the name already gives away, we're a company. We were founded in 2018, and the sole purpose of founding our company was to actually to connect objects everywhere in the world. And so we want to roll out. We are rolling out a LEO stationary satellite network, and aiming for having 256 satellites by the end of 2025. So, if you ask the question, what is the driver of IoT? As the answer to many questions, it's money. People want to gather information, analyze data, make everything more efficient. But there's also a humane side of things, and I think in 2050, the population will be around 20 billion people in the world, and there's an enormous challenge in agriculture, for example, to comply to the demand of food. Already in 2040, there is going to be a shortfall of 40% of water, for example, and the cost of labor and the cost of energy, they're all increasing. So you really need to become more efficient. And like I said, this is just one of the verticals that is quite interesting for IoT. But not only is it interesting for IoT, I think without IoT, it's probably not even possible. And as Gail mentioned, traditional infrastructure is mainly focusing on people. It has been built purely for communication between people. So in many of the rural areas, there's a lack of communication. And obviously that's where we as a satellite operator can fill the gap. And especially with the new developments in telecommunication, making it more accessible. We do believe there's a huge potential for any of the satellite operators, I would say.
Thank you all. And I think very interesting already in terms of what I gather and what I hear from both the added value side and the main driver. Definitely cost efficiency. So maybe during the discussion we can go a little bit more into that. Ubiquitous connectivity as an added value, definitely, from the satellite industry. I heard about collaboration as well, and again, like we'll touch upon that. Gael, you meant profitable, all stakeholders. The value chain is huge, and you really need to make sure everybody, is benefits from it in a way, including the end user. And then from Niels, I think something you said that really strike me is, if I may translate that in my own words, it's nearly IoT for satellite to the service of the greater good. When you really think of it, it's not just about, it's the human side as well, and it's addressing big humanity problems and probably the SDGs as well, that we have set. So I think a great introduction from all of you and to touch upon some of the points that we are going to discuss, more in depth. And maybe I'll turn to some of you more to hear a little bit more about your own company, in certain of these areas, what you're doing. And to go back maybe to you, Tele, EchoStar Mobile is currently operating the world's largest and first multinational LoRa, the long-range enabled IoT network, and it offers real-time and bidirectional connectivity across Europe in sectors such as utility, transportation, logistic, and agri-tech. So tell us a bit more, maybe about the groundbreaking benefits, really, that you see these innovative direct-to-satellite solutions will bring to customers and also to the industries that you are working with, and who are your end customer, if you want.
Yeah. So maybe just to set the stage, a couple of words about where we are coming from and why we started this adventure on the LoRa technology. A couple of years back, we've been deploying a lot of backhauling solutions for satellite to deploy gateways in the middle of nowhere. And we realized very soon that in many use cases where the density of the devices was very low, that was not really, the ROI was not really interesting, okay? And then we started to think about bringing direct-to-device, satellite connectivity direct to the device, so to really avoid the need of deploying any kind of terrestrial infrastructure. That is not to replace, that is to complement, because in low density areas, then deploying a terrestrial network is not really cost efficient. So and then we turn around and we say, okay, where do we go? I mean, if we would like to realize these type of devices, what technology are we going to pick? And then we investigated quite a lot on what was available and what could have been working out of the box without investment of several millions to get the technology ready, which would have been increasing again the time by when people would see these come in reality. So our goal was really, how can I get in the fastest way to market to bring a simple solution to people that they can integrate in existing ecosystems? Because that was the key. We didn't want people to reuse, that's yet another satellite proprietary technology. We didn't want to go there. We wanted to use available standards. And that's where we after testing, we realized that the Semtech solution, the new chips that they were coming up with, the LR1120, was working out of the box. There was no investment required to do any sort of change in the chipset, and we could get direct communication to satellite in a very cost-efficient manner. So that's what we did. We built a solution and then we brought it to market. That was a journey that between inception of the solution to commercialization took less than 2 years. Many companies in less than 2 years are probably just having a plan with a lot of slides. We wanted to give a concrete answer to the market, and that's what we did. Obviously, having the advantage of owning the spectrum and owning a large satellite covering Europe, that is a great asset. But we also wanted to make it easy for people to use. So today we have effectively a pan-European LoRa network that is covering from north to south, west to east, across Europe and the sea, providing ubiquitous connectivity. We are not positioning ourselves, in competition with existing terrestrial networks. We want to work with them to bring the 100% coverage, myth to the table. Okay, and the way to do that is integrated with the existing ecosystem. LoRa is a very vibrant ecosystem. It's amazing how many people are developing solutions on top of that. And bringing to market a solution that can be easily integrated in existing devices or upgrading existing devices is clearly a plus. And since we went commercial, the response of some markets has been exceptional. People naturally embracing the technology and saying, yeah, I want to upgrade my device to satellite. To date, we have 3 partners already building solutions in the agri-tech sector, couple of them in the environmental monitoring, one infrastructure monitoring, personal tracking. So there are really a lot of things happening in just 6 months, which is to me exceptional, because at the end it shows that when you get it right and people really buy in it. Maybe just an additional word about why LoRa and where standards, and 3GPP obviously, because that's the other big family. So to us, standards are fundamental. Without the standards, you don't go anywhere in the IoT world because you need to interoperate with people out there. 3GPP at the time where we started was not at the level of today. NTN and NB-IoT was not mature enough. We had to invest several millions just to get the baseband working over satellite, and we didn't have the time to wait. Today we are testing, and we see actually, and we are comparing technologies, and we see actually now a nice complement. They are complementary. LoRa has a very high link budget, very low power consumption. With the satellite, we can get 20 dB margin, which is exceptional for this type of little devices. And it is a different technology and is different use case. So the way we see it forward is really bringing both to market, and integrate as much as possible devices in the existing ecosystem.
Thank you for that, and I think you touched upon a couple of points that I actually wanted to follow up with, maybe with Michael. I direct. That is about collaboration as well with other and standardization, and ST Engineering has recently announced that IoT solutions which will allow for more flexibility and access to a wide range of markets, including, I think you have transportation, energy, mining, utilities, agriculture, and construction, some of which Tele has touched upon. And we know that IoT is clearly a B2B technology that can only succeed through cross-industry collaboration. We've heard it from Gaël, from Tele, from others. So what models of partnership with the mobile industry and vertical industries do you think are needed for IoT to be a success, amongst what Tele was mentioning? Anything additional? But in terms of standardization, do you think that the slow pace of standardization is hindering the broader uptake of IoT? And are the increasing partnerships, the commercial partnerships that we are seeing between satellite and mobile operators and vertical industries, do you think that's going to accelerate the convergence between satellite and mobile and really speed up the standardization process? So, is it going to be the demand that is going to be the market demand that is going to sort of accelerate the standardization, and process?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, I mean, you're right. I think IoT and iDirect have been in IoT for a while, and until recently, really, for IoT solutions, we were looking at L-band. Customers are looking at either expensive L-band systems or VSAT products, which typically kind of deliver data rates that are much higher than necessary for IoT with cost-prohibitive pricing. So our existing customer verticals, such as oil and gas and mining, have long used these services, for example, with SCADA, simply because they were the only ones available. But as I say, they're not always cost effective, especially for infrequent and low to medium network data rates. But iDirect's new portfolio of low cost, small form factor phased array terminals, which are optimized for KU and KA band solutions or satellites, offer customers a much more data efficient and cost effective alternative. And more importantly for us, they leverage our customers' existing satellite hub infrastructure, which means that the customer has an easy entry into the IoT market and maintains data sovereignty using their existing teleport infrastructure. But in answer to your question around models and partnerships, so just last quarter, iDirect delivered the hybrid LTE satellite backup for those small form factor terminals. And although it's a relatively simple feature driven by market need, primarily from the transportation vertical, there's still obviously partnerships and collaborations required with mobile operators and router manufacturers to be able to get that seamless switch to work between LTE and satellite. Another great example we've worked on is the H2020 Ingenious project, which was led by the EU. That's just finished after 2.5 years, but that involved 21 partnerships across 8 countries. And it integrated innovative IoT, 5G, and satellite technologies. Really, the aim was to revolutionize and digitize supply chain to deliver improved predictions, security, and real-time operations. So we got invited to share our insights. We got invited to join that consortium to share our insights on IoT over satellite and provide the hub infrastructure for this cool project. We demonstrated how to track assets like a shipping container across land and sea, and the project used iDirect's 5G ready satellite hub system. And it was able to to keep the IoT devices and the satellite modem together, behaving as a 5G user equipment in the container, always connected to the cloud. This meant that as the shipment moved through the whole logistics and process and supply chain from start to finish, it was never out of touch. And that is a real game changer in the world of logistics, being able to have that seamless connectivity from end to end throughout the supply chain. But in terms of partnerships going forwards, I mean, iDirect believe firmly that satellite will be an indispensable part of 5G's future. And that's mainly because 5G with terrestrial networks can only go so far, and to ensure truly global and reliable connectivity where terrestrial networks can't reach, satellite has to be a key part of that. So iDirect's had a robust track record of working with consortiums and standard bodies. We've worked with 3GPP in the past, 5GPP, 5G MAG, and we've had a deep involvement with initiatives such as Sat5G and Osmosis. And that's really just to ensure that satellites' place in the 5G landscape is secured. So, you know, we really believe that only through collaboration with our ecosystem and partners can we continue the convergence with new space, new ground and telcos in this 5G era. And then I think you had a question about the slow pace of standardization. So again, with that ingenious project, I mean, it was driven through the use of standards, and it was that standards-based approach that enabled the solution to work across both non-terrestrial and terrestrial networks, delivering that seamless experience for the end customer. And that the standardized protocols, interfaces, and frameworks really ensured the interoperability and the scalability of their overall solution. I mean, IoT implementation, especially industrial IoT, involves handling, processing, and storing data from sensors. It relies heavily on standards, including network protocols, communication protocols, data aggregation, and regulatory, as you mentioned earlier. And those standards, you know, have implications for data security and privacy. I think the challenges remain in IoT in terms of standard adoption. And handling unstructured data and data market, you know, global different data market regulations are going to be a slight blocker for that. But I think it is standardization that ultimately is what will enable interoperability and growth between these different types of networks. I mean, iDirect's VSAT systems have really until now been sort of managed as standalone systems. But today this is changing because some of the terrestrial networks are now becoming dominant, such as the 5G, 3GPP, and the Metro Ethernet standards. And so these standards are really forcing us to enable our customers to integrate satellite communications into their existing terrestrial environment rather than having to manage the satellite system as something on the side.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think, yeah, all foot for foot, and on the interoperability, scalability, I mean, maybe that's something we can, you know, come back to as well afterwards. One of the things I think is very dear to my heart. I come from 20 years in telecoms, and you know, connecting the unconnected has always been sort of the driving thread, common thread that I followed along. And when we go into IoT, it's no longer just, as you said before, you know, I think it was Tele or maybe Niels, like it's not just about people, but it's also now about connecting things, you know, that we're connecting. And Gael, I wanted to turn to you because we are, you know, until fairly recently, satellite connectivity option for IoTs were not the most reliable or cost-effective that the solutions that they were out there. But you know, you mentioned that they are, and others. So I'd be very interested to hear. But also, it's often been said that you know, 5G and including IoT, and if you want in that, could potentially increase the digital divide. And I had a, you know, the pleasure of having the former CEO of MasterCard, Ajay Banga, who's now the president of the World Bank, in an Edison Alliance, which was for inclusion that we created at my days at the World Economic Forum. And he said, you cannot have the Internet of Things without having the Internet for everyone. And I thought that was quite a powerful, sentence if we want IoT to be successful. So what role can satellite communication play in ensuring that this further digital divide doesn't happen? And what can services such as, for instance, Eutelsat, your Halo for IoT project, what can they do to drive the cost down and to bring IoT to hard to reach and rural areas in these developed economies that otherwise, SMEs, we always talk about people, but it's also about how do you connect SMEs, which are the oxygen of so many economies around the world, and enterprises, around the world. So I'd be very interested to hear about your experience with your project on this.
Yeah, so at Eutelsat, we are committed to bring connectivity in each territory where there are not only users but also sensors potentially. So it makes me think this quote from Ajay, it makes me think of a project in Morocco where we were involved in connecting containers that were used to offer not only connectivity to the local community, but also gather data from sensors that were installed around this connected container. So of course, there is a link between broadband internet and IoT applications, because at the end of the day, we are using a connectivity to connect people or sensors. But it's true that on the other hand, with Halo, we are running this innovative project, which is, so Halo stands for Eutelsat Low Orbit. And the purpose of Halo is a dedicated constellation for IoT applications that is used to extend the coverage of LPWA networks. And specifically in the very short term, we are pushing the LoRa networks in order to, because it's a robust and mature ecosystem. But there is also in the roadmap to add the 3GPP standard, because we've been involved and an active member to the release 17 of the 3GPP. So we are pushing also to connect LTE-M and BIoT devices as well. And today, of course, we are a member of the LoRa Alliance, and we are pushing hard to make and to deliver Halo compatible devices, because also it's part of the game, not only to have the infrastructure but also to have the device on the ground to be interconnected with your constellation. And so it's true that with such a solution with Halo, the idea is to have a dedicated constellation for IoT applications, because we are definitely aware that IoT is a very price-sensitive market, and you need to find the right balance between the criticality of the data and the cost to collect this data. So this is clearly a calculation that you need to achieve, and for that, that's why with Halo, our vision is to provide an add-on solution to the existing ecosystem in order to extend the coverage very easily, with a limited impact on the hardware in terms of technical modifications, but also in terms of pricing. So that's the main focus for Halo. And of course, in terms of use cases, I would like to mention some of them that are very, let's say, interesting for Halo. It's all about linear infrastructures. So in the utility market, how to monitor electric poles, but also in the oil and gas industry in order to monitor pipelines over several kilometers, or even railways infrastructure when you need to collect data about the status and the health of the network. So all those sensors will need to be connected via satellite, because it will never be via the terrestrial network.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, I understand it's really funny. There's connecting people, connecting objects, and now it's sensors, that you really connect together. I want to turn to Niels as well, and and apologies. I think I wrongly called your company. Is it Sateliot or Satel IoT?
It depends on which in which language you probably say it, but it's Satel IoT. But here in Spain, everybody calls it Sateliot, and we're based in Barcelona. So
okay, so let's go with Sateliot then, in honor of Spain, where you're based. But as I said before, you became the first company to begin building a LEO nano satellite constellation using 3GPP, the 3GPP 5G IoT standard, communicating with terrestrial cell towers and to fill the sort of the gaps in data networks worldwide. So you told us already a bit in the intro, but maybe if you want to go one notch further in terms of how is your company going to take advantage of the 5G IoT standards? I know we are further down the line, we're only at release 17, there is 18, there is 19. How do you see that evolve for your company, and really what advantage is it going to be bringing?
Well, obviously it's going to bring us a lot of advantages, but we're not only taking advantage of the developments, we're actually also contributing since we started. And as you know, we are a young company, so we started with a clean sheet in front of us. And the philosophy was very soon is that if you cannot work with standards, it's very hard to have and create mass adoption in the market. So yes, we have been working together with 3GPP. We have been contributing to the development of Release 17, which for us is extremely important because for the first time in the history, terrestrial network and satellite are being brought together by this release. It's a seamless handover. Once a device who supports the Release 17 goes out of coverage of a terrestrial network, it will go to the satellite. It will go to a different band, and it can use the satellite. So the impact for us is enormous because that means that we can focus on our satellite, we can focus on our core network, and we don't necessarily need to focus on the development of chipsets or modules because that is going to be an industry standard. So that brings us a lot of efficiency and allows us to have full focus on our core network. But not only that, it also means that for the end users, it's going to be much easier to adopt satellite in their existing ecosystem because they're going to work with the same module vendors as they always have been working with, and they're not even going to spend a lot more money on the modules itself because they're going to be the same kind of modules. They're just going to be a newer version of the existing ones. So that for us is obviously very important to be able to create mass adoption, and that's on the end user side. But I think Satel IoT is also focusing on the distribution channel and on our go-to-market model, and that is where we decided to become an operator member of the GSMA, and allowing our core network to be fully integrated with any other mobile network operator. So that means that any mobile network operator who wants to add satellite to its SIM cards for its end users, they can have a roaming agreement with Satel IoT, and as soon as again the device goes out of the network, it will look at our satellites, and we will do the authentication with the HPMN, the provider of the SIM card. And if that user is allowed to use our network, we will give them the capability to use the network. So both on the end user side and on the network side, we are going for full standard solutions that have been already accepted in the market.
And I think you touched upon something that is very interesting in terms of the integration, with the terrestrial. I think for most of it, I was at the GSMA for 15 years. So going back this year to the Mobile World Congress with my interim at World Economic Forum out of this industry, going back this year, after 4 or 5 years of not going to Mobile World Congress, my biggest sort of takeaway was really the presence of satellite at Mobile World Congress, and you can really see this integration happening, partnerships happening. The content is there, the partnerships are happening. So I think something very interesting to see as we look at the future, because it's probably going to have an influence as well on standards, but also on the way we look at spectrum and spectrum allocation and spectrum management and sharing. So I think that is very, very interesting.
And one thing I can add to that is that if you especially if you look at NB-IoT, it's a service that it doesn't provide a very high ARPU, but if you add satellite to the portfolio, you also immediately increase your ARPU per user, which is quite interesting for the mobile network operators, obviously.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very, very good point. Maybe I'll take a question that has been from the floor, and I don't know who wants to take it, but it was falling a bit as well in the question I had for you all of what are the significant barrier of entry, for the IoT uptake. And we've listened to some of you a little bit, but mainly we've listened a lot about the benefits. But a question from the floor that we have is, what are the downsides of industrial IoT? The weather, line of sight, sun flares, latency, any of these downside to satellite and having continuous connectivity for systems that must stay connected? So I don't know who wants to maybe take that question.
Maybe about latency, only for a few applications, it's a concern because in most IoT applications, you don't need a very high, very low latency. So I would say out of video applications, latency is not a real topic for IoT connectivity.
Yes. Yeah. So if you look at the LEO satellites, they are sun synchronous. So we will not have any sun flare impact from that side, and the latency, I think that very much applies to LEO satellites, because especially from the start, if we don't have the full constellation of satellites, we will have 5 satellites, and we will guarantee at least 4 passes a day. So yeah, you're right. It's for non-time critical use cases mainly that are time delay tolerant.
Well,
anybody else that wants to add? Maybe Tele?
Yeah, I can complement with the counterpart, obviously, because we operate geostationary satellites, which have different properties, bringing different use cases on the table. The satellite is always up in the sky, so you have always a constant connection, and you have a bidirectional connection. So it's true there are use cases where latency is not one of the killing KPIs, and you can live with latencies provided by the LEO constellations. There are other use cases where having real-time connectivity, or simply having the option to send to have data and to send back actionable actions into the field through downlinks is equally important. So we see both, and we see market for both solutions. Which one is going to have the largest application? I think nobody has a crystal ball, and it's difficult to assess. But we see market for a variety of use cases.
Michael?
Yeah, I just to reiterate Nils's point, I don't think that the latency is an issue. I don't think that the sort of sun flares and things like that are an issue, because we're talking about relatively low data throughput, low data rates, and low data polling or infrequent polling. So the data can quite easily be cached in the event of any blockage. I think that the main blocker for us that we're seeing is application integration, and just the applications development within the industry, within the industrial IoT industry and satellite IoT industry. That's really where the effort needs to come from. So I think the technology is there. It's more about how the data is sent and received at either end and processed.
Yeah, a quick one for Niels. Somebody's asking, which is the frequency used for satellite? Is it a licensed spectrum?
Hi, Isabel. Yes, it is. It is a licensed spectrum. The spectrum is the N56 and N256 and N255 band, which and we use the N256, and by heart it's 1.97 gigahertz, or no, 1.98 gigahertz to 2.01, and I think it's 2.1 to 2.13 from the top of my heart.
Niels, I'll stay on you as well, because I think this question, the next question was related to what you mentioned about the integration with the terrestrial. In which part of the, so question for the floor again, in which part of in the network the conversion will happen? And the last mile of the connection to the sensor will be terrestrial or satellite? So I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Okay, so in the case of the LEO satellite constellation of satellite IoT, the last mile to the sensor will be via satellite, so it's going to be a few miles. In the case of LoRa networks, obviously the last mile is going to be LoRa, and I think you. But please let Tele answer the question himself.
Tele?
Yeah, is so, you know, obviously the over the air, the direct connection to the device can be NB-IoT or can be LoRa. Then it depends what you onboard in the satellite. If the payload talks NB-IoT, then obviously the device talks NB-IoT. If the payload talks LoRa, the device talks LoRa. And then it depends how how far you go with the integration into the payload, so in the satellite, or versus a band pipe approach. There are advantages, disadvantages in doing both, especially in terms of latency and service availability. And then you can still have heterogeneous environments where actually the convergence happens at application level. Even between networks, between standard terrestrial networks and standard, and satellite networks, because satellite is not yet fully standardized, makes sense at some point in time to have convergence at application level, essentially, the application frame that is ingested into the IoT platform. So different strategies for different integration and different needs. It depends what people need to do, what people have already deployed, and what they are not willing to change. That's what we see.
I'll turn to another, maybe the last questions for the floor, which I find quite interested. Whoever wants to take it from the panel, but the more devices are connected, the more potential for congestion on a contentious network. Any comments on how we can remedy this? Michael, I see you raise your hand.
Yeah, I mean, clearly throughput is critical in maintaining operational service. I think contention influence is something that you typically see from broadband services that have a lot of headroom to start with, that can afford some contention. Certainly for us, we're talking about low data rate networks, and therefore we carefully size the network with the customer from the outset, because you don't have that flexibility and headroom that you might have from a large broadband network.
Anybody else wants to add, or Niels?
Yes, well, with the LEO satellites, we collect the data, and then as soon as we pass a lander station, we drop or we download the data to the lander station. So in a LEO constellation, it's very much a question on, okay, how much is how many lander stations do you have? So it's dimensioning the number of lander stations, allowing you to have greater capacity, and also adding more satellites to your constellations is how you can cope with the higher demand.
Excellent. And I might take one more question, and then I think we'll have to from a regulation standpoint, and I know I can't remember if it was you, maybe Michael, who mentioned regulation, but from a regulation standpoint, are cellular bands already enabled for SAT or 5G NTN will operate, or on what bands dedicated to satellite? Anybody who?
Okay, I can give it a shot, Isabel.
Give it a shot.
So I'm not an expert, but yes, there are non-terrestrial network bands in the 5G spectrum. They are already allocated, and that's the S-band and the L-band spectrum. So those are the non-terrestrial bands within the 5G.
Thank you. Thanks. So I hope that answers the question. And I think we will have still the opportunity via InReach, to ask questions that you can answer actually on the Q&A. But look, at this stage, I think maybe I just like to turn to all of you, having heard so much about what are the the benefits, the advantages, what are still the drawbacks, and what we still need to work on, and to where we want to get. Maybe as asking you all to sort of as your concluding thoughts, where do you think what is next in IoT and industrial IoT? If we think of the next 5 years or 3 to 5 years, how will the IoT ecosystem look like? What impacts it will have on economies, productivity, environment? And maybe, to add, in many other areas, like was it 3G or others, we've really seen like that it is the killer app that is really the thing that propels, a service to the next level. So do you think there will be a killer app for industrial IoT or IoT? And if so, any idea of what that might be? So I'll start just watching on my screen. Michael, you're the first one, so I'll go this way. Maybe Michael, as your concluding remarks.
Thank you. I think what's next is a lot more IoT devices and a lot more spend. So devices are predicted to double to 30 billion by the end of the decade, and worldwide spending on IoT has doubled in the last 5 years. Global investment in IoT is expected to reach 1.1 trillion in 2023. I think the market is exploding, so increased competition in satellite IoT is inevitable, and that's been further amplified by the launch of direct-to-handset services and Apple Globalstar and Starlink. So it will be a highly competitive landscape, and we've got to be careful of a race to the bottom in terms of costs. But I think those standards, and to your point about killer apps, I think there's been a lot of talk about standards, and just to reinforce iDirect's commitment to the common interoperability. We've been doing a lot of work for the common good, often with our direct competitors. So doing a recent proof of concept with Wavestream, who are a Galat satellite networks company, just to demonstrate conversion of analog signals to digital signals using the Diffie standard. And I think, for geosatellites, it makes sense for us to continue building out IoT capabilities with an extension to existing platforms, as is the case with our IoT solution.
Thank you. Tele.
Wrapping up, geo will not disappear simply because they are a relevant solution until the LEO will not be fully deployed. This will take a while before we see fully deployed LEO constellations provided the same level of QS that you can actually reach today on the geostationary. So this is yet to come, in my opinion. We see actually a convergence between the different layers. Standards, as said, will play definitely a new role that wasn't the case before in satellites. So this is I think the biggest novelty in all of this. Okay, now you get standards and you get mass production volumes chips that now can work also on satellite. I think it's not a killer app, but clearly a key enabler is the fact that, and we see it with LoRa today, we have a modem that can work both on terrestrial and satellite frequencies without changing hardware. It's a single modem, you can achieve both. In the moment we couldn't do that also on the NB-IoT portion or the yet to come NTN new radio, then yes, then there would be seamless convergence between the different networks, and then that will take another level of integration that today doesn't exist simply. As we saw in the past with Wi-Fi and 3GPP, finally that was fully integrated into a single platform. I think that will happen again, and then that will necessarily bring up new use cases that today are not even imaginable. Guessing today a killer app, I think is tough, is a hard job. Literally, what we are doing day to day is really integrating and boosting the ecosystem. I think that's the most concrete response we can give to people to make the satellite connection into these devices a reality. Because until they don't touch it with their hands, until they are not able to do it properly, people will not buy it. So,
thanks. Yeah, I think for everything, that's the problem of the killer app. Gael, I think we only have a few minutes more, and maybe if we can spill over a couple of minutes.
Yeah, sure. So just like Telemaco mentioned, I would say that having a hybrid device that works not only on terrestrial but also on satellite is clearly a demand from the end customers. I think of logistics when you have goods that are arriving at a port of call and then that are shipped to the warehouse. Sometimes there are some gaps in terms of coverage. And definitely, if you have a hybrid device, you can answer this obstacle.
Niels?
Yeah, there's not a lot to add here, Isabel. I think it's the interoperability, is the capability of the end user being able to use multiple networks without having to worry about it, hassle-free. It can even be using LEO and GEO, and I know that as a LEO satellite operator, we do have a challenge ahead, because we need to make sure that we have a fully operational constellation of satellites. But it's a challenge we are happily taking on. And if it comes to the killer app, yeah, I think logistics, agriculture, there's so many, and if you have the killer app, you better keep it for yourself, because it's probably worth a lot of money.
I would say so as well. Maybe don't say it in front of too many people here. No, thank you. Look, thank you all for your contributions. Thank you to all the audience, to the questions that you have contributed as well. I think we've heard a lot. I think to me the takeaway really is interoperability and collaboration is really going to be key to bring costs down, to bring benefits to all, and to make this a success. And also policy and standards ecosystems, which is not necessarily something that probably the satellite industry initially was involved like many years ago. So like we see also this integration that is going to be very critical. So thank you all, really warm thank you to all of you for taking part. It will be very interesting maybe to reconvene in a year or so and see where we are, where progress has been made and what we've learned from a year. So let's keep that in mind, that might be a follow-up, an interesting follow-up to have. But to note that we'll continue the webinar series in September. We'll resume in September and we'll advise on the topic. So again, thank you for sharing all your views both in the audience and on the panel, and enjoy the rest of the day, the rest of the evening, wherever you are in the world. And enjoy the summer, and we'll be back in September. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.